A family should be a place of safety, but sometimes the walls of home become a prison. Today we're talking about books that aren't afraid to look into the dark side of human relationships, domestic violence, how to survive it, and how to find the path to healing. First book. I'll start with a novel that reads like a punch to the solar plexus. Educated by Tara Westover. This is a memoir of a girl who grew up in a survivalist Mormon family in the Idaho mountains, where education was considered the devil's temptation, and violence was the norm of upbringing. Westover writes with piercing honesty about how her paranoid father turned their home into a fortress against the outside world, and her older brother became a domestic tyrant. The author doesn't complain or blame. She simply tells what her reality looked like. When you're beaten unconscious and then told you made it all up. When love and cruelty are so intertwined that you can't understand where one ends and the other begins. The uniqueness of this book lies in its intellectual approach to trauma. Westover is not just a victim. She's a researcher of her own experience. Education becomes not only her salvation, but also a weapon of self-knowledge. She analyzes the mechanisms of family violence with academic precision, but without losing emotional truth. The language of the book is the voice of someone who learned to speak about the unbearable calmly, because screaming won't help anymore. Every page is an act of incredible courage, to call things by their names when the whole family demands silence. After this book, you understand. Sometimes the greatest love for your family is to leave it, and that education is not just knowledge, it's the right to your own version of reality. Second book. The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls is a story about how you can love parents who destroy you. Walls tells about childhood in a family with an alcoholic artist father and a dreamer mother, for whom children were more of a hindrance to their bohemian life than a responsibility. What's striking about this book is the absence of self-pity. Walls describes monstrous living conditions, hunger, cold, constant moves, but finds strange beauty in this chaos. Father tells children about stars while they freeze in a wreck without heating. Mother paints while children rummage through garbage looking for food. Here, violence is not physical. It's in neglect, in emotional unavailability, in parents putting their needs above their children's. This is violence of absence of care, stability, safety. Wall's language resembles watercolor, transparent but with deep shadows. She writes about childhood trauma through the eyes of an adult who learned to forgive without forgetting. Each memory is an attempt to understand how you can emerge from such childhood unbroken. This book is for those who know that love and pain can live in the same house, that parents can be simultaneously a source of inspiration and destruction, and that sometimes salvation is not escape from family but understanding its boundaries. Subscribe call. If these stories resonate in your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are many more important conversations ahead about books that help understand the most complex aspects of human experience. Third book, Why Does He Do That? By Lundy Bancroft is not fiction, but a book that can save lives. Bancroft is a psychologist who worked with abusers for over 20 years, and he knows the mechanisms of domestic violence from the inside. This book destroys myths one by one. No, abusers don't lose control. They choose it. No, they can't be changed by love. They change only when they face consequences. No, the problem isn't alcohol or stress. The problem is the belief that they have the right to control their partner. Bancroft writes in dry, clinical language, but behind every paragraph are hundreds of broken lives. He explains why victims don't leave, because it's often the most dangerous moment. Why abusers are so charming with strangers, because they know how to make an impression. And why family therapy with domestic violence can be dangerous. The special value of the book is in its practicality. These are not philosophical reflections on the nature of evil, but a concrete survival guide. Bancroft teaches to recognize early signs, plan safe departure, protect children. Reading this book is hard because it forces you to face the truth, but that's exactly why it's necessary, because knowledge can become the first step to freedom. Fourth book. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel Kolk is a revolution in understanding trauma. Kolk is a psychiatrist who devoted his life to studying post-traumatic stress, and his book explains why childhood traumas stay with us forever, not only in memory, but in the body. He proves what all survivors intuitively know. Trauma doesn't live in the head, but in muscles, in breathing, in how we react to unexpected sounds. Children who survived violence carry it in their nervous system. in hypersensitivity, in inability to relax, in constant readiness for danger. Kolk writes with the compassion of someone who has seen thousands of wounded souls. He doesn't promise easy healing, but shows paths: yoga, theater, movement, everything that helps the body learn to feel safe again. The uniqueness of this book is in the integration of science and humanity. Each chapter is supported by research, but living people are always visible behind the numbers. Kolk explains complex neurobiological processes so that it becomes clear. The problem is not in character weakness, but in how the brain adapts to the unbearable. This book gives what victims of violence often lack: understanding. Understanding of why they react exactly this way, why it's so hard for them to trust, why their body lives in constant tension. And with understanding comes the possibility of healing. Fifth book. I'll conclude with the novel Beloved by Toni Morrison, a book that won the Pulitzer Prize for daring to tell the truth about family violence through the prism of slavery and its consequences. Morrison tells the story of Setha, a former slave who killed her own daughter to save her from slavery. Now the ghost of this girl haunts the family, and the violence of the past bursts into the present with doubled force. This is a book about how historical trauma becomes familial, how systemic violence turns into violence within the home. Setha loves her children so fiercely that this love becomes a destructive force. She cannot trust them to the world because she knows how cruel it can be. Morrison's language is a mixture of poetry and nightmare. She writes about the unbearable beautifully, but never romanticizes pain. Every sentence is suffered through. Every metaphor is soaked with the pain of generations. The uniqueness of the novel is in how it shows the chain reaction of violence, how the slave-owning system breaks people so that they break each other, how the attempt to protect becomes a way to destroy. This book is for those ready to face the darkest sides of human history and understand how they still affect family relationships. Morrison offers no consolation, but gives understanding, and sometimes that's the only path to healing. Conclusion. These books don't give simple answers because simple answers don't exist, but they give something more important: understanding that family violence can be survived, comprehended, and overcome. Each of these stories is testimony to human capacity for healing, even when wounds seem too deep. Which of these books resonated with you the most? Share in the comments. Your experience can help others. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new reviews of books that change lives.